Good morning, good afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to our panel. My name is Jamie Longmuir, and I work at Red Hat as the product manager for OpenShift ServiceMesh, which is based on the projects Istio, Envoy, Kiali, and Jaeger. Today we have some panelists from the Istio community, the KNative, and Contour as well to discuss their projects, what's been going on in the year, and what's coming up. Let's jump straight into introductions. First up, Nick Young. Could you introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Nick Young. I am a staff engineer with VMware, and I'm the tech lead for Contour, an ingress controller for Kubernetes.
Thanks, Nick. Lin Sun.
Hi, everybody. I am a maintainer on the Istio project. I work for IBM. I'm also a senior technical staff member and master inventor with IBM.
Nice, thanks for joining us. Dan Berg, also from IBM.
Hello, everyone. I'm a distinguished engineer with IBM. I'm responsible for the technical architecture of our Kubernetes and Red Hat OpenShift on IBM Cloud, as well as a co-founder and member of the steering and technical committee of the Istio project.
Thanks, Dan. Brenda Chan from VMware.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brenda. I am an engineering director at VMware, and currently I serve on the steering committee for the KNative community.
Thanks, Brenda. Finally, Paul from Red Hat.
Hey everybody, I'm Paul Morie. I'm a senior principal engineer at Red Hat. I lead our serverless engineering team and represent Red Hat on KNative steering.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks everyone. So let's just jump straight into our first question. To help us get a little bit of context around these projects, I'd like to understand where they fit into the ecosystem at large. So assuming we're starting with Kubernetes, which I think most people have some familiarity with, where does your project fit in? I'll start with Nick and Contour.
Sure. Contour is a ingress controller. That means that you can use any of the resources we support, which are currently ingress, our own CID, HTTP proxy, and soon the new service APIs, to get the traffic to the pods that are running. We will do that regardless of what those pods are. If they're running, vanilla old style pods, serverless pods, or in a service mesh, as long as we can do whatever MTLS you have, then we'll fit in there. So we aim to do a very wide range of ingress.
Sounds good. Now I'll jump to Istio. So Lin or Dan, do you want to give a shot at that?
Happy to, and I'm sure I'll miss things Dan will add. So I think microservices, as people start to develop microservices on Kubernetes, they will encounter a lot of challenges on how they are going to connect the microservices, how they are going to do traffic shifting, how they are going to handle timeouts and retries. So as developers break their monolithic to microservices, a set of new challenges arise, and Kubernetes doesn't really help to solve these challenges, to help the microservice to connect to each other, to help the microservice to establish secure communication, doesn't help the owners to observe what might be going on within different microservices. So Istio is coming as a service mesh to help solving those challenges for developers.
Yeah, and I would just add to that obviously if you're building modern day microservices, I mean, you can't but help to stumble upon Kubernetes as an orchestration layer for your containers. Istio has been developed from day one to work well within a Kubernetes environment. It actually extends the control plane of Istio that manages all of the programming of that network service mesh is built as an extension to Kubernetes. So its API capabilities are extending the Kubernetes environment. The benefit, though, is that it works natively with Kubernetes. It also works, Istio works with native VMs as well, but Kubernetes is central to the management of the Istio control plane and the Istio ecosystem itself.
Thanks, guys. So now to KNative. Brenda or Paul, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. So what KNative aims to provide is a higher level sort of developer abstraction on top of Kubernetes. So KNative serving focuses on allowing app developers to be able to roll out different revisions, make changes easily, handles things like auto-scaling and traffic rollout for you. And then there's KNative Eventing, who handles sort of event-triggered applications. And essentially what KNative provides is tying all of that experience together, because if you were to do it manually, it's actually quite challenging right now. Maybe I'll let Paul chime in here.
Yeah, I would say that's a good summary. One thing that that maybe we'll talk a little bit about later on is that when we say serverless, a lot of folks tend to conflate serverless and functions as a service. We do not currently have functions in KNative, more of serverless building blocks for event activation and scale to and from zero.
Thanks. That's interesting. So actually, that kind of leads really well into my next question about your projects, and maybe just on that note, I'll go in reverse order on this one. So just given that these are fairly complex projects, what are some of the most widely held misconceptions? What is the biggest, most widespread misconception about your project? And I'll go back to KNative because you were kind of heading in that direction. Paul, do you want to jump in on that?
Oh, yeah. I think the misconception I probably spent the most wall clock time talking with people about is that you do not need a service mesh to use KNative. You really just need an ingress. And I think this misconception is probably rooted in like a historical fact that in the very early days of the project, it was there was a dependency on Istio, but we've since removed that a fairly long time ago, and so you can use any of the supported ingress. Of course, Istio is a supported ingress. Contour is a supported ingress. There's a courier ingress that came out of the 3-scale team at Red Hat, but you don't need a service mesh to use KNative.
That's a good point. So I'll go to Istio now. I'm curious, what are some of the misconceptions that people might have about Istio? And Lin or Dan, do you want to? Do either of you want to try on that one?
Yeah, sure. One of the ones that we hear, and we've heard this from day one, is Istio is too complex to get started with, and a lot has changed in the project over the years to simplify the getting started experience. But I think a misconception here is that if you adopt a service mesh like Istio, you have to adopt everything about that Istio, about the service mesh and all the capabilities, which isn't true. We have many people that adopt, very much to what Paul was saying, many people adopt Istio simply for the ingress capabilities, and they do not enable and take advantage of the other features from day one. They gradually work their way into it. And going down a path such as that, the install simple, the adoption of simple ingress through the Istio gateway is incredibly simple. So it doesn't have to be complex. It gets more complex as your application is more complex and takes advantage of more complex features.
Right, that makes sense. Given the breadth of these services, it does make sense to start simpler and work your way up. Nick, is there anything from Contour's perspective that people might have misconceptions about?
Ironically enough, we often get the question or the statement, so you're using Envoy, does that mean you're a service mesh? To which I say, well, no, Contour is not a service mesh. It's using Envoy as a reverse proxy for ingress only. So that's probably the biggest misconception that, again, to use Paul's phrasing, I've spent the most wall clock time talking to people about.
Sounds good. Thanks, Nick. We touched on the fact that there are dependencies like Contour using Envoy, and obviously with KNative, there's Istio, and these projects are kind of part of a wider ecosystem. So given some of these dependencies between projects, how does your community go about coordinating with other projects? And I think in this time I'm going to go back the other way. So back to you, Nick, with Contour, and how do you work with the dependencies and other projects?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think obviously our major dependency is Envoy. We work as closely as we can with the Envoy team. We've done all the usual stuff to get signed up to the security announcements so that we can make sure we're keeping up with those things. But we've been doing the Envoy's XDS for a long time, the same as the Istio folks have, and so we've had to start out with. We didn't have, when we started using it, we didn't have the Go control plane available, so we've written all our own stuff, and the Envoy folks have been really helpful as we look to move towards Go control plane to be able to make it easy to move towards XDS v3 and things like that. With respect to coordinating with other projects, right now, Matt Moore and some of the other folks from KNative have actually been really instrumental in pushing back a whole bunch of really great fixes for us. And the fact that they've included Contour in the testing for KNative has actually been really helpful. They've caught a number of scale problems that our testing just wouldn't have been able to catch, which I was very appreciative for.
Right. That's great when it's a two-way street there. So I'll throw the same question at, because Istio has the similar Envoy dependencies to Lin or Dan, if there's one of you guys wants to take a shot on it.
So we do have the same dependencies with Envoy. We actually have our own Envoy within Istio organization. I think our goal is to get rid of it. But for the longest time, we had the mixer filter, which we now get rid of them now, but we still have our WASM stuff that's built into Istio. I think the longer term is we want to consume upstream Envoy directly, but now we're still maintaining in this a small, a little bit forked version out of Envoy, but we do sync with the Envoy upstream pretty frequently. The other Kubernetes, we worked really hard to get quarterly releases, which kind of matches Kubernetes release schedule. We do, because Istio interact with a lot the Kubernetes API, and Istio resources are also built as Kubernetes customer resources. So we have somewhat dependencies with Kubernetes, and we learned in a hard way in recently Istio 1.7, when it first goes out, we kind of move up some of the API too fast, and it break our user who's still on Kubernetes 1.15. So we learned very hard, not moving too fast, so we could potentially support, not really officially support, but at least doesn't break users who are on slightly older version of Kube.
Makes sense. Some good lessons learned there. Okay, so jumping to KNative, which I know has even more dependencies. I'm curious how you guys manage. Brenda or Paul, do one of you guys want to take a stab at it?
I think for KNative, it's interesting. So as Nick mentioned, there's Contour support, there's Istio support. And I think the work group leads and the TOC and the community have done a really good job making sure that they're developing the right interfaces to connect with these different implementations. I think the community really wants to make KNative as portable as possible, and in order to do that, they understand that they need to make that experience with Contour and Istio and upstream Kubernetes be successful as possible. So a lot of them do end up going to the various community meetups or the SIG meetings or the work group meetings that's applicable for the different work group leads.
Yeah, one other challenge that we've had is that and this was a bit of an eye opener for me, having been historically focused on OpenShift, where we in the upstream KNative want to support a variety of different cubes, and it was sort of eye opening to see that they really move at different rates. If you look at the cube as a service products from different cloud providers. So we kind of have this sort of sliding highest version of cube that we can get away with, and it's frequently behind the cube that's under development or that was just released. So a balancing act there has been doing things like before conversion webhooks were pervasively available, doing sort of what we could until we were able to rely on that feature. And then the other end of it is that if folks that are watching aren't aware, the Tecton project, which you'll probably hear more about in Commons, and I'm sure you'll hear more about at KubeCon, it actually started out as part of the KNative project, and they have a dependency on some of our internal libraries in KNative. So there's a need for really good communication around that, like we call it the PKG package that Tecton uses too.
Cool. Thanks. Okay, I think now we're going to jump into more of what's been happening in the projects and what's coming. So I'd like to hear a little bit about what's been happening in the previous year. So I'll ask the question: what, from your perspective, is the most important thing that's happened in the project? And if it's different, what's the best thing that's happened in your project? So I'll start with Nick for Contour.
Yeah, I guess the most important one is probably similar to the best one for us. We joined the CNCF as an incubating project in the last year. That has been a really exciting process to go through, and it's really great that now we're officially part of the CNCF. When talking to a bunch of users of Contour, they've definitely found it very reassuring that we are now a CNCF open source project, and to know that we're not going anywhere. Yeah, I think that's probably one of the best things that's happened this year. I mean, we've done a lot of releases, released a lot of features and stuff. We managed to keep to a monthly release cycle, which I'm super proud of. But yeah, I think just the overall best thing has been joining the CNCF.
That's awesome. That's a big step. So for Istio, Dan or Lin, do you want to talk about this year?
Yeah, I would say probably one of the best things or most notable things that has happened with Istio is the change in the Istio steering committee. We created a new and voted in a new charter for steering, and held elections and changed the actual structure of our committee itself. And the outcome of that has been a much more diverse steering committee, and beyond just adding more diverse set of members to the committee, we've also reduced individual power of any one organization within the committee, so that no one has a majority onto themselves. So it's actually made a big difference. We've noticed it now that we've had the new members. New ideas, new dynamics have been added to the project. And it's actually been a really nice change to the project, to have other voices beyond just the initial founders in the project. So I would say that's probably one of the most important things that has happened to the project. Obviously, there's the looming, we did not go to the CNCF as we were hoping, but what we have found is that the change in the management of the trademark, which was also a pretty large event in the community, hasn't really changed the dynamics on a day-to-day basis of how the community and the Istio project runs. It is rooted in a foundation of pretty solid group of organizations and members that hasn't changed even with that adjustment in how the trademark is managed.
Yeah, sounds good. Lynn, I'm curious, do you have anything to add to that? Or?
I definitely agree, what Dan said. I would say on the technical side, I think the most, there's so many accomplishments we did, certainly, but the most impactful one is the Istio control plane actually went from microservices to monolithic to really help our user to, our operators who manages Istio to simplify their installation management experience. And honestly, I would say it actually helped us for the maintainers on the project. We actually see a lot less issue with Istio control plane by going back to monolithic. So it's really a win-win from a variety of different roles on the project.
Yeah, that was a nice change. So jumping over to KNative, I'll start with Brenda on that. I'm curious for you, what have been some of the biggest things this year for KNative?
Yeah, this is a great question. I looked back at my Twitter account this past year and saw all the changes we've been able to make within the KNative community in terms of clarifying the contribution ladder, defining the execution lead role for working groups. I think the highlights for me personally are getting an elected TOC in back in March. And just recently in September, we defined a new process for how we might have an elected steering committee that can focus on community health and community growth, and also a trademark committee where vendors who are actively contributing to KNative can have a veto or a say in how the trademark is used. So that for me is really exciting.
That's huge. Yeah, that's huge. Jumping to Paul, from your perspective, what have been some of the big things this year?
Well, beyond the governance stuff that Brenda mentioned, I would say that having serving and eventing reach V1 level of maturity for their APIs was pretty big. There's this like classic conundrum in open source where people only want to use things that appear to be stable, whether they actually are or not. So getting to that V1 API version without an alpha or beta qualification to it is psychologically important for a lot of folks. And my hope is that we'll see an uptick in usage now that scary alpha and beta is out of the API.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I know a lot of customers are not confident to use something until it has that big 1.0 seal. So that was looking behind. Now looking ahead this year, I want to go back to you guys and basically ask what's exciting about what's coming next. What's interesting there. So again, I'll start with Nick again on Contour.
Well, we've got a bunch of stuff on our roadmap for next year, around adding in a bunch of things into Contour that basically catching up is the real story there. But things like rate limiting. We've recently added external authentication, which has been a hole for us for a while. But I think the biggest thing that I'm looking forward to adding in the next year is support for the new service APIs that are being built in Kubernetes SIG networking at the moment. We've been involved in that project since its inception, and I think that it's really a great chance to remedy some of the deficiencies of the thing which were things that we just missed when people started building Ingress because no one had done it before and no one knew what we needed. But now everyone's been using Ingress for some time, and now we kind of know what it is that we need. And so we're able to design a much better API that's going to fit more use cases and be much more applicable. And hopefully, at the end of the day, I think the thing we all want there is to not need, over 100 annotations on your Ingress object to be able to control the stuff you need to do for your Ingress.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're very excited about the Service API project as well. Jumping over to Istio, Lin, what's interesting in the future for Istio?
Yeah, so I think our users are getting comfortable using Istio, at least on the common scenarios in single cluster. So a lot of focus of the project has been shifted to how do we improve users' experience beyond a single cluster? How do we onboarding users services on the VM securely and easily? How do we allow users to run services on different cluster? How do we federate different meshes together? So I've seen community has been kind of shifting this notion of beyond single cluster experience, where we really want to expand the service mesh, beyond a single Kubernetes cluster. So for instance, we've been consolidate our multi-cluster model into one single model, which I really like. So for the longest time, there was like two models, and we got tons of questions from our user. Why would you use this or that? We've also introduced external control plane, which allows user and mesh admin to work with single cluster where their control plane runs outside of the cluster and provide opportunity for vendors who runs Istio as a service for the user. So these are exciting things we are introducing in the community to improve users' experience, whether it's single cluster or whether they want to grow the mesh beyond the single cluster to include VMs and multiple clusters.
Thanks. Yeah, I know there's a lot of things there we're excited about as well. Dan, anything else to add to that? What's coming this year?
The only thing I would add, I definitely agree with Lin. The multi-cluster scenarios are a pretty exciting space. I think also aligning with the changes that are coming in Kubernetes, also a big deal. The new Kubernetes multi-cluster services support is a big area. Obviously aligned with that same notion of the multi-cluster, multi-mesh scenarios. These keep coming up with our customer sets. Continuing to expand on support for hybrid workloads, because not everything is container, so you do have legacy. So being able to tie into those legacy aspects is pretty key. And also just the overall simplification of the use cases, how to simplify the day two operations, doing problem determination through various CLI actions and analysis that's being added into the project to make it easier to detect problems and help you to resolve configuration problems that you may have throughout your use of the Istio project. So continuing to simplify the use cases, and then, as Lin was pointing out, the whole multi-cluster, multi-federation support is pretty exciting work.
Absolutely. Exciting times. So jumping over to KNative, Paul, what do you see as exciting for the coming year?
Well, one of the things that to go back to what I previously said around hitting that V1 API version is we have not actually released 1.0 yet. So the API version and the actual version number of the software, two different things. One of the things that I think related to the trademark committee that Brenda mentioned earlier that became a lot more clear during our community process for working through the governance stuff is exactly what the bounds of the mark are going to be, and I think that will allow us to declare a 1.0 version, which is another really psychologically important thing in terms of adoption. And then I really just am looking forward to having our steering elections that should be later this year at the end of the year. And I feel like our community got a great jolt of good feelings around the TOC elections earlier, and I hope that we'll get another good jolt from that in the community when we do the steering elections.
Sounds good. Brenda, is there more you want to add to that?
Maybe one thing I'll add is we've seen a lot of excitement around forming a functions working group within the community. And I think that will be pretty exciting coming up. We've seen a lot of excitement, a lot of people passionate about this topic. So I think that's probably something that people can look forward to.
Sounds good. So lots to come. Final question that I'm going to go around with you guys on is, so open source can have many interesting moments, and there's a lot of benefits. So I'd like to hear about what's your favorite open source moment that you've seen in your project. And I'm actually going to go back to Paul first on this, because I know that this is one that he was interested to talk about. So.
Yeah, well, one stands out in my memory, and that is that during our community discussions on governance, that we shifted things into a 100% public mode because we had felt that we were sort of overdue for progress, and we wanted our community to be able to participate in that process. Brenda, you'll have to correct me if I misremember the number of people, but I'm pretty sure in that first public meeting that we had about 55 or 60 people dialed in, and that was just a great feeling to see that people were that interested in working through these things, and just energizing to know that other people cared about it as much as I do, and I know that Brenda does.
Sounds good. Brenda, anything to add to that?
That's exactly the moment that came to mind for me as well. I believe it was 65 people on a Zoom call or a Hangout, and it was just so good to know so many people cared about the success of this project, and everyone was open for discussion. There was no pointing fingers. Everyone just wanted to make the community better, and that was a really nice feeling.
Nice. So from an Istio perspective, I know it's been an active year in the Istio community. Dan or Lin, do one of you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, and I'm gonna go beyond just this year. I'm gonna go back to 2019. Was one event that I thought was incredibly interesting. It was KubeCon in San Diego, and this was pre-COVID, obviously, so we could actually get together. But the problem was we wanted to do a meetup for Istio, but we kind of organized it late, and we're not the best at some of these organizational skills, if you will. So we tried to organize one, but we ran out of space. There was no available locations that we could use. But someone came up with a pretty novel idea and an approach, and come to find out, our meetup was later in the evening on a boat, which I've never had a meetup on a boat before. It is kind of odd when you're walking up and you're looking for the address, and lo and behold, it is. I forget the name of the boat. Someone's Lynn, you may remember the name of the boat, but it had a funny name. And we were we did the full meetup on the boat, which was really awesome. Lots of people turned up. Obviously, we had to keep the audience to a small number, so it was basically an invite-only meetup, which was a bit strange. But we had a packed house. The other cool thing about that event, that was the first time that we had, as one of the discussions, Lynn and I actually had a talk on that meetup. But it was the moment when we realized that Istio had been out for a little while, and we have several books on the Istio topic. At that meetup, we had every single author of all the books that have been written so far were at the meetup. So that I thought that was pretty cool that we had all the Istio authors at the same meetup on that boat. So that was pretty fun.
That's great. Lin, your perspective?
Wow, that was great. Sorry, I don't remember the name either, but that was like a really special evening. Gosh, it's so interesting. I remember somebody, I think it was Christian, was trying to show a live demo on that boat where there was no projector. So everybody had to stare at his tiny monitor for his demo. But it was a really cool event. I actually thought, I definitely agree that's one of the signature moments, but I would add, before hearing dance, I was thinking, gosh, last year, I think we were rated like one of the top 5 fastest growing open source projects in all of GitHub. So that was just amazing for the project itself.
That's really neat. So finally, Nick, I'm curious from the Contour project, a little bit younger than some of these, but what have been some of the moments that have stood out for you?
Yeah, because we're so much a younger project and a smaller project than the others, my stories are kind of different, I guess. One of the great open source moments for me has been being accepted into the CNCF and being able to say, okay, now we're really open source. And one of the things that's come with that is greater visibility and more comfort from people to come and talk to us about what they've been doing. One of the things that I found when I became the tech lead for Contour, which was about the same time as we were accepted, was that a number of people had, we were a small team then, and a number of people had, because they wanted features that we just couldn't build for them fast enough, they'd gone off and decided to carry a full fork of Contour. And since then, I've talked to them and found out what the sorts of things they needed, and we've been able to bring a couple of people back to to using the vanilla Contour and to upstream the changes that they needed or equivalent ones. One of the great examples of something like that was we had a request to put cause functionality into Contour, and we found it really difficult because of the way that we'd structured our own CID to be able to find a place to put that. And so we recently merged after a year of design talk, the actual PR to make that happen. And that, I think that was a testament to the people who really wanted the feature, that they stuck with it. Even though we weren't so great at getting it started, but they stuck with it and helped us out, and everyone has won in the end because the people who needed the feature got it, and we got them to build it for us. I guess and the other thing is just all of the times, again, I really want to thank the KNative team for they've discovered 2 pretty critical performance issues for us because of the scale testing that they run on Contour, that we probably wouldn't have found until it went out wider. And so that was another great open source moment where people who are not part of the core maintenance group have really helped us and really been able to drive improvements to the product, even though it's not their main job.
Thanks, Nick. That sounds really exciting. I'm looking forward to see more of how Project Contour continues. Well, that was our last question. Does anyone have any final thoughts they want to add before we close out? All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. I want to thank our panelists and also everybody else who's taking their time to spending the time with us. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of OpenShift Commons, and have a great day.